Fertility ain't fair.
That's right.
So let's talk about it. Real, raw, unfiltered, with me, your friend in fertility. Hey, welcome back to Fertility Ain't Fair. I'm your host, Britt, and you are listening to season 2. Y'all, I still can't believe it. Like, for real, I'm like, we're really on season 2? We killed it in season 1? And the marathon continues because, as we all know, what is still true is that fertility ain't fair. So let's talk about it. In this episode, we have Elizabeth King of Elizabeth King Coaching. She is a certified fertility health coach, a master certified ICF Life Coach, a birth and bereavement doula, and a new parent educator. And her mission is to help people of all backgrounds conceive a healthy baby and carry to term. And she lives by an amazing motto, which she breaks down in the episode, which is help one person every day. So, love her already. She actually had 3 children of her own after the age of 40, and she'll get into that as well. And she believes in really taking a holistic approach to conceiving and really, being able to show women support to achieve their dreams of conception and parenthood at any age that they can. She also helps clients through natural fertility, infertility, IVF, miscarriage loss, early pregnancy PTSD, and new parent support. She's crazy, followed on social media, on her Instagram page at ElizabethKing_coaching. She's the host of a podcast, Pretty Little Tribe. She's also been in several magazines, TV, other podcasts, etc., etc. So look, we are happy to have her. Let's get into this episode with Elizabeth King and all of her amazing coaching and life moments brought to you by her. Welcome, Elizabeth, to Fertility Ain't Fair. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you today.
Me too. And I'm super excited to just learn because I'll be honest in saying that I had no idea fertility coaching was even an option or a thing until I came across you and what you do. So I'm excited to not only educate myself, but of course, I know if I, am clueless about it, I'm sure someone else might be too. So I'm hoping we can, help some other people out and, find more information to get people the help they might need in their journeys. So I do want to ask you, you had a client about a week ago that was being induced. So I had to ask, is the client and the baby doing well so far?
Yes, thank you for asking. Yeah, she's doing fantastic. Everything went
Awesome.
super well. Um, she was a client that has another 4-year-old son that unfortunately has a terminal illness. So going into this round of IVF for this baby was really um, a big deal because, and this is something that I talk about with some of my clients that do have genetic disorders, that it is
Mm-hmm.
possible to have a healthy baby, and you just need to find the right clinic and right doctor to work with in order to make that happen. But yes, she did. Thank you for asking.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Oh, awesome. Well, I want to start out by how do you define yourself? I start out every show this way with every guest. And so, what are the words or phrases that you would use to describe who Elizabeth King is?
Well, I live by the daily motto of help hope, which is help one person every day. And I hope that somebody else would describe me by that I am always trying to support others and will often ask, is there some way I can support you?
Mm-hmm.
And just showing up in that way in my life has really defined how I support and serve other women and men for that matter
Mm-hmm.
in my day to day life. Because if I just keep focusing on what's in it for them, how can I help this person? That in turn helps me in so many ways.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I love that motto. And so I guess before we get into Elizabeth the coach and the
Mhm.
doula and et cetera, let's talk about Elizabeth the mom and your personal journey to motherhood. Because after reading a little bit about you, I've read that you had 3 kids after 40.
I did.
So how'd you get to that place?
Yeah. So I had my first at 41 and my last at 44. They're all boys, which is crazy. So they were 3 under 3, and
Mm.
it's it's still crazy. I keep saying that, this is just a phase and it'll pass, which it will, of course, but it's just intense with the age differences that they
Mhm,
have right now. But yeah, I fully believe that we are all capable of manifesting and bringing into the world what we want to create, whether
mhm.
that's children or a business or a podcast or whatever it may be. And it's just a matter of figuring out the right way to do that. So it may not look like you expect it to look,
Yeah,
but you can get there. And having the people surrounding you and the right team behind you, you can make that happen. So I really didn't buy into the, well, you're over 40, so it's not possible. In fact, after each child, even though I had the losses, I just knew, I had a knowing in my mind and my heart and my gut that
mhm.
this is what I was meant to be doing. And luckily for us, we were able to do that. And I support many, many women over 40 having children, both naturally and through artificial reproductive technology. And again,
Mhm.
no matter how that looks like for you, it is possible.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, and also because I remember the first time I was told by the doctor, like, "Well, how old are you?" And at that time, I think I was probably 31, and I'm 33 now, and
Hmm.
so I remember him saying, "Oh, yeah, okay, you still have some time." Like, "Well, what does some time mean to you?" And he was like, "Well, by 35." And I was like, "Wait, what?"
Right.
And I was just like, "Since when did 35 become, like, the crucial, like, alarms going off, like,
Yeah.
your eggs are dying. Like, when did that happen?" Because I didn't recall ever being told that until I was told that.
Right.
So I
Well, that
love the fact that you said you manifested it and did not buy into these kind of I don't know, boundaries or medical kind of milestones that they kind of place on you when you are having these discussions at a certain age.
Yeah, I often refer to it as, you get your calendar invite of yes, no, maybe, and you just respond, no, thank you. Like, I am not going to buy into that. Nope.
I love
Nope.
it.
No, thanks. Um, I mean, obviously the reality is the reality, right?
Sure.
You are born with your eggs, and
Mhm.
your 30-year-old eggs are 30, your 40 are
Mhm.
40, etc. But we do have the ability to affect change and the cell growth of those eggs.
Mhm.
Most of us do, I should say. Some have other underlying issues, but um, I think it's really important to know that you can affect your body and live a healthy life and do certain things that will help you to have healthy eggs. And it's not only just the egg, but you want the sperm to be healthy as well, and that
Mhm.
matters. And that ages too. People think that it doesn't, but it actually does.
Yep.
So yeah, all of those things are important.
And did you ever feel, because, like, I'm talking with my friends now, and so most of my friends do not have kids just yet. My close friends don't have
Hmm.
kids just yet. And so they're kind of in that same boat of like, do I want to freeze my eggs? Do I want to talk about that just yet? Do I want to kind of preserve my fertility before 35? But did you
Yeah.
ever feel like you had to preserve, or did you feel pressured into, kind of racing towards this age time frame? You know what I mean? I'm sure
Yeah.
most of people were having kids and doing all of that stuff before 40. So how
Yeah.
did you kind of mentally get past that and move into the space of I'm doing it my way?
So I actually did freeze my eggs at 36, and went initially at age 30 to freeze my eggs, and the doctor said I was too young. Similar
Mm,
to you, was like, well, you still have some time, and I was still single at 36, so I went back and he said, well, freezing eggs is not ideal, but we'll do it. Kind of, and the way I felt is it was an insurance policy, kind of checking off the box of, okay, I don't know what the future holds. Let
mm-hmm,
me just do this just in case and whatnot. So, and so I did do that, and I had 11 eggs frozen. Um, and again, that was age 36. as I was going from 36 to 40, when I started to try to get pregnant at 40, at that point, I wasn't really leaning on the fact that I had those eggs,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak, on the side. It was more of because I was familiar with fertility and how it all worked. I knew that to some degree, well, a big large degree, I was better off trying naturally to
Mm-hmm.
see if I could get, my 40-year-old egg at that point to be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Just because the thawing process of the eggs, oftentimes an egg thawing versus an embryo thawing is not the
Mm-hmm.
same.
Right.
So you don't have the best results. Out of my 11 eggs that we unthawed, which we didn't do that until I was between baby 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, I was 43. Um, n- let's see, out of the 11, they 8 did not thaw at all. Like they didn't work at all to even try to be fertilized. And 3 were fertilized, but they didn't make it to blast, which they didn't make
Mm-hmm.
it to day 3. So
Mm-hmm.
none of those eggs that I froze at 36 were viable.
How did that feel?
Um, you know, it- I was prepared. I was prepared because
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't under the assumption that this is going to work for
Mm-hmm.
100%. But I have to say, it was really disappointing, right? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
to go through the IVF process on your own at
Mm-hmm.
age 36 and hope that that would be there for you, only to find out that it didn't. Yeah, it was a little bit of a punch in the gut, but at the same time, I knew the expectation, so I wasn't surprised, I guess.
Yeah. And you mentioned you went at 30 to kind of do a consult on even talking about freezing your eggs. So
Hmm.
I know a lot of us in my circle, like, it's not a very commonly talked about thing. I think it's getting, more and more common, which I'm happy about. And I'm also happy to be the friend that brings that into a conversation now.
Yeah,
But how did you, or what, what made you want to go at 30, or were you told to go?
yeah.
Were you already educated enough to know it was the right time, or kind of how'd you get in there at 30 and say, hey, I want to talk about this now?
I had friends that I had worked with that were older than me that had gone through fertility issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'd kind of mentioned, like, kind of in passing and in jest of, yeah, you should do this. Don't let this happen to you. And
Mm-hmm.
when I got divorced at age 30, I really didn't know what my future looked like, right? I didn't know if I was going to meet somebody in a year or 2 years. I
Mm-hmm.
certainly didn't think it was going to be 10 years later.
Right.
Um, so that's why I went at age 30, is because I had kind of heard it around me from other women that were older of, I wish I would have done this when I was
Mm-hmm.
younger. And so similar to having your 401k and all those other things in place, I saved my money and I did it at 36 because I just wanted to make sure that I had a backup plan essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. And I hope that as more and more women like yourself kind of pass that information along, it gets into our ears, at an earlier age, just to at least have the conversation and know your options. Cause that's
Yeah,
something that I just feel like, is people just don't know the options, or they assume certain things, or assume I can't afford it, or assume it's not for me. And it doesn't have to be, all those things if you have the right information ahead of time. So
for
thanks for
sure.
sharing that information.
For sure. And the other thing I tell all of my younger girls is, if you're thinking about doing this now, because the eggs thaw different than the embryo, in
Hmm.
an ideal world, if you had 10 eggs, I would do maybe 5 frozen in hopes that you're going to meet somebody and that'll work later on their own, and
Hmm.
5 fertilized with sperm
Hmm.
donors. And then in the event you don't have somebody and you want to do this on your own at age 40 or 41, or I had someone at 47 just recently do it, you have your 35-year-old eggs already fertilized and ready to go, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of like backup plan, right?
Yeah, that's a
So
good
like,
point.
you have your eggs in case you want to do it. But I
Hmm.
have, a handful of women that are doing it on their own and they're in their 40s now. And, looking at the sperm donors with their 40-plus-year-old eggs versus
Hmm.
having done it before. And the only reason why I say that is that the chances of the thawing process working better is different with the consistency of an embryo thawing versus an egg.
That's a really good point. I never even thought about like that option of kind of splitting them up and doing some here, some there.
Hmm.
Like you mentioned, to give like a backup,
Yeah.
plans A, B, and C.
Yeah,
Like,
I know.
that's awesome. So let's get into coaching. So like I said, I had no
Yeah.
idea that fertility coaching was a thing. Of course, I know about life coaching. I've done life coaching before personally. But I guess define it for us, for those of us like myself who are just kind of learning about this as even an option or something to maybe look into in the future. How do you define like what fertility coaching is?
Yeah. So I think, thank you for asking, because I feel like most of what we come across is just normalizing this conversation and educating people
Mm-hmm.
that it is a thing. So, um, every coach is different, just like every life coach is different, right? Some take you through a different process than the next one. For me, I really focus on the holistic aspect of everybody. So their mental health, their spiritual health, their physical
Mm-hmm.
health. So we will not only look at physical blood work to see is there any red flags there and tailor your supplements and your lifestyle changes based on what is coming off of your blood work,
Mm-hmm.
and in conjunction with your doctor. So we work through on that aspect as well. If there's any red flags, anything that's coming up with your thyroid or low levels of
Mm-hmm.
whatever, we go through food sensitivities so that we remove any of that. I have a lot of people that come to me spending tens of thousands of dollars with fertility nutritionists,
Mm-hmm.
on fertility diets where they're not eating, no gluten, no sugar, no dairy, all these things, when actually they're fine to be eating those things. And they come to me and end up getting pregnant once we say, like, okay, don't hold on so tight to these things because
Mm-hmm.
it's causing your body more stress. And then the biggest part of what we focus on is the stress levels and how that plays a part in the whole fertility aspect. So if you are seeking some sort of coaching or cognitive behavioral help during your fertility process, you're 55% more likely to conceive. And that's not a small number. So we
No,
focus
that's
a
huge.
yeah. So we focus a lot on that. We tailor that to everybody individually. So what does that mean for you to manage your stress? Because not
Mhm.
everybody's different, right? Some people can meditate all day long. Some people feel like
Right.
they go insane to meditate. Some people love to journal. Some people, whatever it is, we work through that to figure out what is, when you're feeling triggered. Let's say you see
Mhm.
a pregnancy announcement or a
Mhm.
birth announcement or something that's triggering to you, or maybe you get a negative pregnancy test again that month. We really work to give you the tools of knowing how to handle that so you can stay in more of a calm state.
Mhm.
Because as long as your cortisol levels, your adrenals are all good, that's helping your body be able to conceive. So everything goes together with the coaching program that I do, whereas some coaches may focus only on the mental aspect and finding joy in the journey. Others may
Mhm.
focus more on just the nutrition or whatever. So that's how I'm a little bit different from others, but as long as you find somebody that you resonate with and you feel like really gets you, that's all that matters. I just want people to feel like they are supported through the journey,
Mhm.
and be educated. There's so much to learn through this whole
Yeah.
process. And depending on where you're at, we meet you there and help you figure out what your next steps are and where you need to go next, essentially, so that you get to your positive pregnancy test sooner and more educated, and hopefully with spending less money, because you know that you aren't going down paths that you don't need to be going down.
Right. That's amazing. And then I guess how did you what came first? Did the life coaching come first and then you added fertility coaching? And if so, what made you want to kind of get into this professional coaching?
Yeah, so I have been a ICF certified life coach since 2008, and not transferred, but transitioned my coaching really to fertility in 2017, end of 2017, when I started going through the fertility process myself, as far as having the losses and really kind of realizing what the path for somebody going down this road
Mm-hmm.
emotionally what that's like. And there was really a void in support for
Yeah.
women that were going through it. And even though it may have been there, it wasn't talked about. So, if I were to go to talk to my doctor and say, I really need to have somebody to talk to, they might say, here's a therapist you can talk
Mhm.
to. But it wasn't really openly spoken about there as far as
Mhm.
they're not offering the help. And this journey, the stress again, is such a key factor in your success. To not have that play a role as part of the whole treatment plan essentially was
Mhm.
almost, you know, an oxymoron, if you will, to some degree.
Yeah, so I was actually going to ask you in regards to kind of therapy. So, coaching versus therapy or the combination. So, I guess what would you say are the differences if someone's trying to think like, hey, I might already have my therapist, which is great, but
Hmm.
like, what are the things that coaching brings that are a little bit different than just going to therapy, during your journey?
Yeah. So I can only speak from how I operate my
Hmm.
coaching business, but um, traditionally, a therapist is a once a week session, and it's
Hmm.
usually an hour or 50 minutes. And once you're done for that time, Tuesday at 10 a.m., you see them next Tuesday at 10 a.m. And it's really just a conversation, generally speaking, of what's happened on the past and to get you where you are now. We really focus on the future and
Hmm.
what's the goal, right? So in this case, it's to get pregnant and stay pregnant and have a healthy baby. Um, it's more of the way I explain it, it's more of a personal trainer. So you have a relationship with your personal trainer. You may know that they're married or they have kids and you talk about them and you
Hmm.
know their names, and you can even have a lunch with them or something. It's not against the rules, so to speak,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Whereas a therapist generally will hold that boundary. I really believe with coaching, especially in this fertility realm, this is an evolving emotional up and down roller coaster. So,
Yeah.
depending on what your blood work was that day, what your ultrasound was, what's happening with your relationship, like, are you having conflict because you're ovulating and your guy doesn't want to have sex when you're supposed to, and things like that. That doesn't just happen Tuesday at 10 a.m., that
Right.
happens throughout the process. So, we communicate as much or as little as they need to via Voxer, the Voxer app, which is a voice memo app.
Hmm. Hmm.
So they're continuously getting support through their process of fertility as much as they need. And that to me is the real difference between coaching versus therapy.
That's a huge difference. I mean, like, therapy is definitely important, I think. And I completely know it's been life changing for me, definitely going through this for the last 3 to 4 years. But that's a huge difference, as you mentioned, with the continuous support and having those kind of more almost like, a friend, it sounds
Yeah.
like. It's a little more. Personal, and there are of course boundaries that you may not be able to come across when you're with a therapist. So this seems more like I can call you and be like, Elizabeth, girl, today was not my day. Like,
100%. Yep.
not
That's
my day, and I need you to be there for me like a friend would be there for me. But you're also coaching me through things that are healthy, on top of I'm sure venting and whatever else, but give me the coping tools I need to get through that day, or through that moment. So
yeah.
that is a huge difference.
Yeah, and also a therapist. So I'm trained in, again, reading the blood work labs and knowing what supplements are going to work for each person, and the nutrition. What do we need to do and tweak that for people, and doing their food sensitivities so we know you're avoiding certain things that aren't healthy for you. Whereas
Hmm.
again, a therapist doesn't really get into that bigger picture.
Yeah.
Um, so again, therapy is great. I think I have a lot of people that actually pause their therapist while we're
Hmm.
working together and then go
Hmm.
back to them later. But I always feel like whatever works for you and whatever feels good for you, you do all the things that are going to lift you up during your time of fertility, especially whether that's therapy versus coaching or in conjunction with or whatever. You can never get enough support during that. This is the largest thing you're going to be doing in your life, I believe.
Yeah.
You are
Yeah.
creating another human being, and you can buy houses, sell houses, cars, get divorced, whatever. None is going to be as life changing as creating another human being. And any support that you can get to help you through that, I think is so vital.
Absolutely agree. You also mentioned a little while ago that you started this type of coaching during your own journey.
Yes.
So obviously it makes sense because you're able to relate on a very personal level, but also I'm thinking about it's already so much on you individually. Like, how in the world were you able to, I guess, take on these, women or couples and men and their journeys and their stories all while you were going through your own?
That's a great question. So, when I was going through it, or when I started to help people this way, and again, this really, now that I say that out loud, it started by just helping one person every day through this. So,
Mhm.
I started with somebody calling me to say, my friend is going to meet with a fertility doctor. Would you mind talking to her before and giving her, some information around this?
Mm.
Mind you, I had my first at 41. So I was already doing all the things prior to that,
Mhm.
um, regarding fertility. And I've been in it a long time because I started at 36. So
Mhm.
I had been around this for a while. So that's kind of how it evolved initially, was just referrals and friends of friends. And then when I had my loss, that was really my light bulb moment of, I need to focus on this, like, for real,
Mhm.
versus just, as a volunteer heart project,
Mhm.
because I was getting my DNC, and the couple next to us was going through their first round of IVF. And I remember being so genuinely excited for them, but at my absolute lowest low, right?
Yeah.
This story that I had written for my life of being so excited to bring in this new baby was just taken from me. And I didn't know why. I thought something was wrong with me, even though logically I knew it wasn't.
Mhm.
Um, and that's really when I started to say, okay, I'm going to do this with all my heart and my effort to support men and women that are going through this. And I think because I had the background of 10 plus years of life coaching, I had all the tools to manage through helping others when I was
Mhm.
kind of going through it as well. Versus, had I not had that background, I think it would be difficult. So I often see there's a lot of coaches out there that actually are in the process themselves.
Mhm.
And I do think that that's a little bit difficult, because it is hard, because you can get triggered by other people if you don't really know mentally the right tools to kind of help you bring you back to where you need to be,
Right.
etc. So, yeah.
And so you also had mentioned in your bio that you also help with early pregnancy PTSD.
Yes.
And that's something that I had really, I guess, not come across. Being someone who has not conceived yet in my life, I have not dealt with that type of PTSD, but I've also talked to women who have, and maybe haven't been able to identify what it was, but it's I'm assuming in terms of, you go through this and we all know what PTSD is. And so you have this kind of reoccurring feeling that, I don't know, something is wrong or it's not going to end well, or you're used to having bad news. And so you might get kind of stuck in that space. So could you walk us through what that is and kind of how you deal with that when it comes to clients?
Yeah, it's a little bit trickier because it depends on everybody's story, right? So,
Hmm.
did they have an early loss? Was it a late loss? What was their journey before they got pregnant? Everything kind of matters as to how we manage working through that. But
Hmm.
essentially, we work backwards to say, what are the facts that we know for sure, right? And
Hmm.
how do we figure out our the circumstance, which is what it is, right? We cannot argue in the court of law. Like, I was 8 weeks pregnant and now I'm not. Nobody can
Hmm.
argue that, right?
Hmm.
That then we go to our thought. You have the ability to choose the thought that comes from that, right? So you can either say, this was ripped from me, or some other more positive thought, right? So
Hmm.
we work this down in almost like a formula, and we kind of work backwards from that. And once people can see this essentially on paper, to say, okay, I'm going to make a choice that when I get triggered or I have this, this thought comes up around the anxiety or whatever around my pregnancy loss, I'm going to go through this formula to help me get back to where I need to be. And if you also are thinking this negative thought, I always just say give your the space in your brain equal space, equal thoughts, right? So if I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
think something negative, also think something positive. Because right now we're not dealing with a circumstance. We're just dealing with a thought. That
Mm-hmm.
thought is cannot be argued in a court of law. So we can choose both thoughts at the same time. So if you think I'm this pregnancy isn't going to work, you can also say this pregnancy will work,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or
Mm-hmm.
I'm not able to carry full term. I am able to carry full term. So
Mm-hmm.
each time we work with somebody, it's very individual depending on where they're at. We also work through a lot of the grief ahead of time. So we clear through a lot of that from an emotional and spiritual aspect. So we really give a lot of space to that pregnancy before, whereas what did that look like before? How was it when you guys were trying? Was it stressful? Was it happy? How was the day that you got your positive test? Let's talk through that. What about your first doctor appointment? All of those things. And then we continue to heal that through the grieving process and
Mm-hmm.
do some sort of remembrance and acknowledgement for that specific pregnancy, and
Mm.
really work around knowing that that pregnancy does not define this one, right? So just because that happened before does not guarantee that it's going to happen again. And of course, as I mentioned before, is each situation is different. So they could
Mm-hmm.
have genetic issues. They could have recurring miscarriage loss that has no reasoning behind. It is really hard to get your head around something when you don't have any answers, right? You've done all the tests, everything comes back normal, and you're still having losses. So that's when it becomes a little bit more difficult to say, are you do you feel like you're able to keep moving in this, or do you need to take a break, right?
Yeah.
Allowing yourself that space and grace that is best for you, without any judgment around it, because having a pregnancy loss is not given the gravity that it's needed. So in some
Mm-hmm.
countries now we're finally getting to a point where they are letting people take bereavement leave,
Yep.
because they're recognizing this. But traditionally, it's not. Like you
Mm-hmm.
have your miscarriage and you're kind of expected to go to work back on Monday, sort of thing.
Right. Right.
So this is a really significant experience in your life, not to be taken lightly. And we give that the space to go through that so that when you do go through your next pregnancy, and especially those first 12 weeks, that you have less amounts of stress and anxiety through that.
That's huge. I mean, just thinking about the steps that you're taking to not only ask the questions, but as you mentioned, give space to recognize this is what happened before, during, and after. This is what the healing has to be to get through that. This is what grief looked like during that time period. Or maybe I'm still grieving because I never dealt with it.
Yeah.
And not just kind of, as you mentioned, people are, or jobs or companies aren't, you know, I haven't come across one personally that is giving the space to do that. I'm sure, you could do it individually and ask if you have a great relationship with your company that they would allow you to do it. But it's not, as you mentioned, a common thing. It's not like I know for a fact that I'm going to walk into a job or a company and I'm going to have space or time or days to take to grieve a different kind of loss. And so the fact that you're able to work with someone to work through that in a very personal way is just, it's amazing to me. I mean, because people don't, most women I feel like don't get that chance
Yeah.
to, and don't have the person who can I talk to about this, right? Yes, therapy is cool, it's great. However, as you mentioned, this is very different. This is a deeper conversation. And it's not just kind of rushing past this one or getting past it to move on to the next one. It's really giving someone space to go back to that point, kind of live through it, grieve through it, heal through it, and then come back on the other side again. Because most people, I don't think, have been able to do that. So that's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. When I've had my first loss, I went to a therapist that specialized in miscarriage loss, and I walked out the door still crying and upset because
Mhm,
I I didn't know if she had been through it. She wasn't able to have that relationship of,
mhm.
a dual-sided conversation about it, and that's really what I needed at that time. I needed
Yeah,
somebody to tell me it was gonna be okay. I've been there, and look I have 3 beautiful children now.
yeah.
And I think that goes a long way when you're talking to somebody who doesn't know, "Is this ever gonna work for me?
Mhm,
Am I gonna get through this? Am I gonna Is my next doctor appointment gonna be ending in a way that I don't want it to end?" And I think whether you see a therapist or a coach or a friend who's been through it, I think it's really important to find that support and
mhm,
know that you are not broken. You are not alone. This is happening to 1 in 4 women that we know of, meaning there's a many, many that go
mhm.
unreported. And having that conversation and being open about it really normalizes it for everybody. And that's what is making this change for companies, et cetera. So
Yep.
I really strongly believe in this wholeheartedly about, being open with your losses so that others don't feel so alone when it happens to them.
Yeah. And so if someone is curious at this point, because I know my mind is just like racing at this point, because there's been so many good nuggets of information. And so if someone is now curious and wants to know, okay, when should I reach out? Not how, but when should I reach out? Is there a time period that is best, or is it kind of up to the individual to say, I am pregnant or I've had my struggles? Like, when should someone reach out to you and, kind of discuss what it could look like if they wanted to work with you?
Yeah. So again, everybody's at a different place in their journey. So ideally, somebody who would be, 6 months prior to trying to conceive, so you can figure out, is your cycle normal? What do we need to kind of get in line before you start to conceive?
Hmm.
And then there's that 120 to 150-day window for your eggs to kind of not regenerate, but to get a little healthier. So
Hmm.
you want that window or runway before you really start trying to conceive so that your body, your egg quality, everything is where it needs to be. Um, Obviously, most people don't seek out any sort of fertility help until they've been trying and they're realizing
Hmm.
this may not be as easy as they expected.
Hmm.
So that's any point in your journey. I always say, especially with the younger ones, that being under 35, you want a baby when you want a baby. It doesn't matter if you're 20 or
Hmm.
40, right?
Hmm.
And if somebody's pushing you off because they're telling you, "Oh, well, you have some time," that doesn't really feel good. And
No.
when you want that, right? So
Hmm.
anytime that you feel that, okay, is there something missing that I could be adding, or something's just not feeling right, or this isn't working and I feel like it should be working? It helps to talk to an outside perspective that can kind of run through everything and say, okay, we've checked all the boxes off of all of here, or did you check this, or what's going on with that? And maybe you need to circle back with your doctor because that number looks like it should be a little bit different. Those are the things that really help for you to feel like, okay, I'm taking control of a situation that in most cases you don't have any control in. And
Yep.
for especially people that are type A, that's generally really helpful because you're
Hmm.
able to put a plan together and know that you're taking steps. So, again, circling back to if Susie Q is doing a pregnancy announcement or whatnot, you're not as triggered because you're like, nope, I'm working with my coach. I have my plan. I know what I'm doing. We're on our way. You feel like you're taking some
Hmm.
action. Again, it's like having a personal trainer. If you know you want to lose 10 pounds or gain 10 pounds and you're working with a trainer, you're doing it, right?
Yep.
You're doing the things you should be doing. So I think any point in your journey where you feel like, I just want to make sure that I'm, doing all the right things, or I want this as an ongoing, sort of therapy type of situation, that's a different experience. So we do 90-minute deep dive sessions where we kind of go over the whole thing, nutrition, supplements, decision making, what's next for you, your plan, all of those things. And then we also do sessions of 3 or 6 where that's where the boxer support comes in and that's where the ongoing relationship comes in. So you need to decide for you what is a better fit for you. And maybe for some people it's both. We also do that. But any point in your journey that you just want to feel like you're getting there faster, you want to feel like you have a little bit more control and that you're keeping your stress in order because, when you're trying to conceive and everyone's like, oh, well, just relax and it'll happen. And you want to punch them in the face because,
In the face.
yeah, that's not how it works. Right. So we help you get to a point of figuring out, okay, when those sorts of triggers happen, what is it for you that will keep your stress level good, right? And
Yeah.
that's different for everybody. So we really make it very tailored to each person so that they feel supported and they feel that they have a safe place to be when they're going through that kind of height of the critical experience.
Yeah, and I love the plan because I'm also a type A, and so I was kind of laughing in my head when you mentioned that. But it does feel so good to have a plan because, as you mentioned, so much of this journey can feel like it's out of your control. Like your body feels like it's out of your control sometimes. Your mental space, it can feel like, gosh, well, what can I control? But this is definitely a step in the right direction, as you mentioned, to create a plan and say, okay, it may not be today, but I know the steps that I'm going to take. I feel confident in this. I'm confident in Elizabeth. I'm going to get it done. And, together we will, be able to get to my end goal. And so that is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, one more thing, you have a separate, I won't separate, but a different arm to your business, and that you also have a coaching academy, right?
I do. I am a big
Yes.
believer of, again, helping one person every day. And
Mhm.
fertility, unfortunately, is something that is not going away. And in fact, it seems to be getting worse. And the
Mhm.
numbers were at a 6 year, continued decline in
Mhm.
infertility. And the more coaches we can get out there to educate people and help support men and women going through it, the better. This was kind of stemmed out of many people reaching out to me asking how they can work with me and get certified as well. And finally, I just decided I was going to start this academy to help all those people to in turn help others and get the word out that this is a
Mhm.
thing and you can feel supported going through this. And there's so much information online that's not accurate. And
Mhm.
um, I always say you can't undo what you've read or seen. And for a lot of my clients, it's really important that they stay focused. I always say, stay in your lane. This is
Mhm.
your story. We don't necessarily want to take on Susie Q's story because it brings up a lot of other information that your body doesn't need to process, your brain doesn't need to
Mhm.
process. And
Mhm.
so the more that we can get coaches out there to help kind of narrow the path of the success of fertility in men and women, I think the better. So yeah, we have the Fertility Coach Academy and we are helping others to help others.
I love it. That's awesome. So, I have learned so much. I knew I was going to, but it's amazing, and I just thank you for being transparent. I thank you for living and walking in your purpose and in your passion and helping one person at a time. You definitely helped this person today,
Mhm.
and I'm sure many others will be helped, continuously helped through your work and through your coaching and through your academy. So tell our listeners how they can reach you and follow you. And of course, plug your business and your podcast and whatever else you have going on.
Thanks. Well, there's a lot of information that you can find out on my website at elizabethking.com under the resources tab. All kinds of information from the acronyms in the fertility world, which is crazy. So when you start in this path,
Yeah.
it's a little bit, what does this mean and that mean? So
Hmm.
it's kind of a cheat sheet to questions to ask on your first doctor appointment, to an IVF checklist, lots of things that you can find there, as well as setting up a free 10-minute call that we can just have a quick discussion of where you're at, where you need to go. Sometimes I meet with people and we kind of figure it all out in those 10 minutes or 20 minutes, and
Hmm.
that's all we need. There, you can also find the link to my podcast, which is A Pretty Little Tribe. and lots of other good stuff. So I can't wait to see you in one of those spaces, as well as Instagram, of course, at Elizabeth King _coaching. And you can always DM me there.
Awesome. Well, Elizabeth, I feel like we have like a certified fertility celebrity in the house today. So I just thank you again for stepping into Fertility Ain't Fair, educating me and our listeners on what you do and what your business is, and sharing your story to motherhood. So thank you for being a boss babe, an amazing mom, and for being an advocate for all of us who are in this journey and will continue on the journey. So I just thank you for stepping in and giving us a lot of information today.
You're welcome. Thanks for normalizing the conversation for everyone, too.
I mean, give it up. We're going to give high claps for Elizabeth King joining us from Elizabeth King Coaching. She dropped gems, she dropped support and knowledge, and we appreciate all of those things. I know one of my takeaways was absolutely her motto of helping one person every day, but also I loved in the beginning when she talked about, when you get the calendar invite, the fake calendar invite from your doctor saying, hey, you have this milestone to hit, right? In order to conceive and have children. It's like, no, thank you. Nope, decline. I don't accept, right? Health is health, and what you're born with in our case is what you have. However, you can still, find ways and find methods and take care of yourself and still know that conception naturally or through other channels is still possible, potentially over the ages of whatever, fill in the blank, whatever your doctor told you. And so I love that she made a point to say that and know that to be true. It's also what she lived. And I also love the fact that she has done an amazing job reaching back out to younger women to let them know, hey, this is what I know to be true. Check in with your fertility, check in with your reproductive health, look into freezing eggs or embryos. All of these things are amazing because they're normalizing the conversations that you really don't typically have, or I know I didn't have, growing up in my teens and 20s. And it wasn't until my 30s that it really became a discussion. And so the goal here is to create these conversations and make it normal and make it about, being proactive about your feminine health. And so we thank her once again for hopping into Fertility Ain't Fair. Make sure you like and follow her. Check out her website and her services. She is amazing and a great resource, as she mentioned. So if you just want to reach out, schedule a consult with her, just kind of give her your information, see what she has to bring to the table. She is up for it. And also in the meantime, of course, make sure you follow us on social media at Fertility Ain't Fair everywhere, and check out our website, fertilityaintfair.com. Whew. And until next time, you already know where I'm going to be at. I'll be right here. So I'll see y'all in the next episode of Fertility Ain't Fair. And as I always say, I am your forever friend in fertility. Stay hopeful.